A dying billionaire offers his maid a marriage contract for one night, but his reason broke her heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, A Dying Billionaire Offers His Maid a Marriage Contract for One Night but His Reason Broke Her Heart. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured against the tall glass windows of the Hale mansion that night, each drop sliding down like tears on marble. The lights inside were dim, quiet, almost afraid to disturb the silence of a man who was dying upstairs. His name was Alexander Hale, 37 years old, a self-made billionaire whose empire of finance once dictated half of Manhattan. But tonight, his empire meant nothing. His heart, weak and failing, beat only in painful intervals under the hum of the oxygen machine. Downstairs, Clara Evans finished scrubbing the last marble step of the grand staircase. Her hands were red from the detergent, her uniform slightly damp from the rain she had carried in earlier. She had been working here for 7 months, invisible as most maids were, cleaning rooms where no one ever said thank you. Every dollar she earned went to the hospital in Brooklyn, where her younger brother lay in a coma, waiting for another surgery she could not afford. As she wrung out the mop, the mansion's intercom crackled. A weak voice, low but steady, spoke through it. "Clara, come to the master suite. Now, please." Her chest tightened. Mr. Hale had not called her by name before. Usually, orders came through the head butler. She wiped her hands on her apron, straightened her posture, and climbed the long staircase that spiraled toward the east wing. The hall smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked wood. When she reached the double doors, she hesitated. Then she knocked softly. "Come in," he said. Alexander Hale sat by the window, wrapped in a charcoal robe, his skin pale as the sheets beside him. An IV line trailed from his arm to a monitor that blinked in slow rhythm. Yet his eyes were still sharp gray, watchful, the kind of eyes that had once intimidated boardrooms full of men twice his age. "Sit down," he said. She obeyed, perching on the edge of a leather chair, unsure whether to look at him or at the glowing monitors around the room. The rain outside thundered louder. He studied her for a moment before speaking again. "Clara, I do not have much time left. My doctors say weeks, maybe days. I have spent most of my life building walls. Money, power, control. None of it matters now." He paused, his breath shaky. "There is one thing I need before I die. I need a wife." Clara blinked, certain she had misheard. "A wife, sir?" He nodded faintly. "Yes, a legal one. I am offering you a marriage contract. It will last for one night. After that, you will walk away with enough money to save your brother and start your life again." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The words hung in the air between them, absurd, impossible. He reached for the folder beside him and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed contract, crisp and cold. "It is not what you think," he added quietly. "There are no expectations, no obligations. I only need to fulfill a clause in my will. If I die unmarried, my estate falls into the hands of my cousin Victor, a man who will destroy everything I have built. I want to make sure at least some of it goes somewhere meaningful. You, Clara, are the only person here I trust." Her throat felt dry. "Why me? You hardly know me." He smiled faintly, a tired shadow of what once must have been a charming grin. "Because I have seen you. You work until your hands bleed. You never take a day off. You speak to the houseplants when you think no one is listening. People like you remind me that there is still something real left in this world." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Finally, Clara whispered, "You want me to marry you? Tonight?" Alexander nodded. "Just tonight. One ceremony, one signature, and I will make sure your brother receives the best care money can buy. You will never have to work another day in your life." There is a lie. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. "This is madness, sir. I cannot." He interrupted gently. "Please, do not say no yet. Think about it just for a moment. Sometimes a single night can change everything." His voice cracked, his hand clutching his chest as a wave of pain crossed his face. Clara jumped to her feet, reaching for the medicine tray. He caught her wrist, his touch warm despite the coldness of his skin. Do not pity me, Clara. I am already gone. But I can still make something right before I do. She stood frozen, staring at the dying man who, for the first time, looked more human than powerful. Outside, thunder rolled again over the Hudson. Inside, a pen waited beside the open contract, its ink glistening under the golden light. And that was the moment Clara realized her life was about to change forever. Clara did not sleep that night. She sat at the edge of her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the faint light leaking through the curtains. The rain had stopped, but her mind was a storm of thoughts. She replayed Alexander's words again and again, a marriage contract for one night. It sounded unreal, like something from the melodramas the housekeepers whispered about during lunch. But the offer was real. The signature line with her name typed neatly above it was real. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from the hospital. Payment overdue. Surgery postponed. Her stomach twisted. Her brother, David, had only a few weeks left before his condition became irreversible. Every doctor said the same thing without the operation. He would never wake up. Clara pressed the phone to her chest, fighting the panic that rose in her throat. She had come to New York with nothing but determination. Her parents were gone, the debts endless, and this housekeeping job was supposed to be temporary. But life had a way of caging dreams. Now she scrubbed floors in a mansion while her only family lay trapped between life and death. At sunrise, she walked back to the East Wing. Her hands trembled as she knocked. "Come in," Alexander's weak voice answered. He sat in the same chair by the window, the morning light drawing thin lines across his face. He looked even paler than the night before, but there was a strange calmness in his eyes. "Have you decided?" he asked quietly. Clara swallowed hard. "I will do it. For my brother." A faint smile touched his lips. "Then let us begin." By noon, the mansion's private chapel was prepared. Only 3 witnesses stood there: the lawyer, the butler, and a nurse who had known Alexander for years. The ceremony was brief, quiet, and without music. Alexander wore a black suit, his movements slow, deliberate. Clara wore a simple ivory dress chosen by the housekeeper, its hem brushing the polished marble floor. When the minister asked for their vows, Alexander's voice was soft but clear. "I, Alexander Hale, take you, Clara Evans, to be my lawful wife until the end of my days." Her voice trembled as she repeated the words. But when she looked into his eyes, something unexpected flickered there. Not pity, not obligation, but gratitude. After the signatures were placed, the lawyer handed her a sealed envelope. "Your brother's treatment will begin tomorrow morning," he said. Clara's knees weakened. She tried to thank Alexander, but he lifted a hand. "No thanks, just stay with me for the evening. That is all I ask." As the witnesses left, the mansion fell silent again. Clara followed him into the grand dining hall, where a table for 2 had been set. She had never eaten there before, never even crossed that threshold as a servant. The chandelier glowed warm above them, casting soft light over the crystal glasses and silver cutlery. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the slow tick of the grandfather clock. Then Alexander said, "Do you believe in mercy, Clara?" She glanced up, unsure how to answer. "I believe in kindness, sir, even when it costs you something." He smiled faintly. "Then perhaps you and I are not so different. I built an empire and lost my soul doing it. You gave up everything and still kept yours." Her heart ached at the honesty in his tone. Beneath the weight of his sickness, he seemed more alive than anyone she had ever met. When the dinner ended, he stood and extended his hand. "Walk with me?" They moved slowly through the long corridor toward the glass conservatory at the back of the house. Outside, the garden glistened with rain. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you will receive everything I promised. The contract will end, and you will be free." Clara nodded, but her chest tightened in a way she did not expect. For a deal that was supposed to mean nothing, it suddenly felt like the most human thing she had ever done. As they stopped by the window, he looked at her again, tired but sincere. "Thank you for saying yes," he murmured. "You have given me something I thought I had already lost, time that feels real." And for the first time, Clara saw not a billionaire, not a patient, but a man who simply wanted to be remembered. The next morning, sunlight broke through the heavy clouds that had covered the Hale estate for days. The air smelled of rain and roses from the garden below. Clara woke early, her heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and fear. She was now, by law, the wife of Alexander Hale, The thought felt unreal, like she had stepped into a life that was never meant to be hers. She stood in front of the mirror of the guest room where she had slept the night before. The ivory dress hung on the chair beside her. Her hair was slightly messy, her eyes red from a night of sleeplessness. On her left hand, the silver wedding band glimmered softly in the light. It looked both beautiful and wrong at the same time. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Mrs. Dalton, the housekeeper, stood there holding a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," she said gently. Clara froze. Hearing the name out loud sent a strange chill through her. "Please, do not call me that," Clara whispered. "It is just for one day." Mrs. Dalton smiled sadly. "One day can change a lifetime, dear." When Clara stepped into the hallway, she found the mansion buzzing quietly. Lawyers, assistants, and a nurse moved like shadows through the corridors. Everyone seemed to know what had happened, yet no one dared to speak of it. Alexander was in his study, seated in a large leather chair near the window. The sunlight framed him like a fading portrait. His breathing was shallow, but his expression was peaceful. Beside him sat the same folder from the night before, along with another set of documents. "You came," he said softly. "I wanted to make sure you are all right," she answered. He gestured for her to sit. "I am fine, for now. There are a few things I need to settle before my cousin arrives this evening." His tone changed slightly when he said the name Victor. The bitterness was faint but unmistakable. Clara could sense that there was history behind that silence. Alexander opened the second folder and handed her a small envelope. "This is for you. Inside is confirmation of the payment to the hospital and a deed to a small apartment near Central Park. Consider it part of our agreement." Clara stared at it, speechless. "You did not have to." "I did," he interrupted, "because you kept your word. De sitter austed bopus centaptins from the wall des Fanses." The silence stretched between them until he said quietly, "There is another condition I must ask of you, though it is not written in the contract." She looked at him nervously. "What is it?" "Stay for dinner tonight. Victor will be here, and he must see you as my wife. Once he leaves, everything will be finished." Clara nodded, unsure why her chest ached at the word "finished." The day passed slowly. In the afternoon, she helped the staff prepare the dining room for the evening. She caught her reflection in the tall mirror near the staircase and barely recognized herself. The girl who used to scrub the marble steps now walked through them in silk. But even as she moved like someone of wealth, she could not escape the truth of who she was. As the clock neared 7, thunder rumbled again in the distance. Victor Hale arrived tall, confident, and carrying the kind of arrogance that filled the room before he even spoke. His sharp eyes landed on Clara immediately. "So this is your new wife," he said with a smirk. "How touching. A maid turned millionaire overnight." Clara's hands clenched around the edge of her dress, but she kept her voice calm. "Good evening, Mr. Hale." Alexander's tone hardened. "You will show her respect, Victor." Victor laughed, lifting his glass. "Respect? For someone you married on your deathbed? It is not beat of vas." The words sliced through the air, cruel and deliberate. Alexander's face paled. His hand trembled slightly as he set the glass down. Clara stepped forward, her heart hammering. "Mr. Hale is still your family. You should remember that." Victor's smirk faded for a moment, then returned. "How noble of you to defend him. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts." He turned away, muttering something to the lawyer beside him. Alexander exhaled slowly, his gaze softening on Clara. "You did not have to speak up for me." "Yes, I did," she replied, "because no one else did." For the first time, he reached for her hand, not as part of a contract, but as a quiet thank you. The warmth of his touch startled her. It felt fragile, human, and fleeting. Outside, the thunder rolled again, echoing through the mansion's empty halls. Inside, a strange calm settled between them, a quiet beginning neither of them had expected. That night, the rain returned, soft at first, then steady, drumming gently against the glass walls of the Hale Conservatory. Dinner had ended hours ago, and the mansion had gone quiet again. Most of the staff had retired to their quarters, but Clara remained in the library, staring at the fireplace that crackled in the dim light. Her hands were clasped tightly together in her lap, her heart still replaying the scene with Victor. He had looked at her like she was dirt beneath his shoes, a stranger pretending to belong. His words had been sharp, his laughter cruel. But what haunted her most was the look on Alexander's face afterward, drained, exhausted but proud. Proud that she had spoken for him when everyone else stayed silent. She rose from the chair and began to tidy the books she had been too distracted to read. The house was too big, too silent. Her footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor as she walked toward the east wing. Outside, lightning flickered, illuminating the long hall of portraits that lined the walls, faces of men who had built fortunes and lost them, each painted with the same cold pride. Alexander was the last in that line, the one who had inherited everything but peace. When she reached his room, the door was slightly ajar. Light spilled through the crack, faint and warm. She hesitated, then knocked gently. "It is me," she said softly. "Come in," his voice answered. He was sitting by the window again, wearing a dark robe, the silver ring glinting on his finger. On the table beside him were 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that had barely been touched. The firelight cast gold on his tired features, softening the sharpness that power had once carved into his face. "Could you not sleep?" he asked, his voice quiet but kind. Clara shook her head. "Not really. Too many thoughts." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Then sit. Let us both stay awake together." She hesitated but obeyed, folding her hands neatly in her lap. For a while, neither spoke. The clock ticked slowly, marking the seconds between them. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Do you know why I offered you that contract?" Clara looked at him, unsure if it was a question she wanted answered. "You said it was for legal reasons, to keep your cousin from taking everything." He nodded. "That was part of it, but not the whole truth." He looked out at the rain as he spoke. "I have spent my entire life believing that money could fix anything. When my parents died, I threw myself into work. When my heart failed, I tried to buy more time. But there are things you cannot purchase: dignity, peace, the feeling that you mattered to someone beyond what you could give." Clara listened quietly, the sound of rain filling the pauses between his words. "When you started working here," he continued, "I noticed how you spoke to everyone the same way. The gardener, the driver, even the cook who complains about everything. You see people as people, not as positions. I wanted to be seen like that just once before I go." Her throat tightened. She had not realized that he had been watching her so closely. "I never wanted to trap you in my world," he said, "but I could not think of anyone else who might understand." She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are not what they say you are, Mr. Hale." He smiled faintly. "No, I am worse. I let greed and pride run my life until it ran out. But tonight, I feel something I have not felt in years." "What is that?" "Peace." The word lingered in the air, like a fragile secret. A long silence followed. The rain softened to a mist against the glass. Alexander reached for the whiskey, poured a small amount into one glass, and slid it toward her. "To your brother's recovery," he said. She hesitated, then lifted the glass. "And to your peace." They clinked the glasses gently. The sound was delicate, almost reverent. He studied her face for a moment. "You remind me of my mother," he said quietly. "She used to hum while she worked, the same way you do when you clean the staircase. She said it keeps the sadness away." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe it does." His eyes softened. "You have brought a strange kind of light into this house, Clara. I wish I had met you when I still had time to be a better man." "Do not say that," she whispered. "You still have time." He shook his head slowly. "Not the kind that matters." When he coughed, she stood instinctively, helping him steady the glass in his hand. His fingers brushed hers, trembling but warm. The silence stretched again, heavy with something unspoken. "Clara," he said finally, his voice barely a breath, "when I am gone, do not let them make you feel small. You are worth more than any of this." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Rest now, Mr. Hale, please." He nodded, leaning back against the chair, his eyelids heavy. "Stay until I fall asleep?" She sat beside him, her hand resting lightly over his. The fire crackled softly, throwing amber light across the room. Outside, the storm faded, leaving only the sound of the clock and the faint rhythm of his breathing. For the first time since she had entered that mansion, Clara felt something she could not explain. A quiet connection that had nothing to do with contracts, money, or duty. It was something human, fragile, and painfully real. Hours later, when she finally stood to leave, Alexander stirred and whispered her name. Clara, she turned. Yes? His lips curved into a faint smile. Thank you for seeing me. Her chest ached at the sincerity in his voice. Good night, Alexander. As she closed the door behind her, the house felt different, still vast and cold, but no longer empty. The air carried warmth now, the kind that lingers when two lonely souls finally find a moment of understanding. The following morning came gray and cold. The storm had cleared, leaving behind a heavy silence that filled every corner of the Hale mansion. Clara woke early again, expecting to hear the usual footsteps of the staff or the sound of the nurse preparing medication, but the halls were still. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. When she reached the east wing, she saw the nurse rushing down the hall. His heart rate dropped overnight, the woman said in a low, urgent voice. The doctor is with him now. Clara's chest tightened as she hurried to the master suite. The door was half open, and inside, Alexander lay pale against the sheets, oxygen tubes framing his face. The doctor adjusted the monitors, while Mrs. Dalton whispered prayers under her breath. When he saw Clara at the door, Alexander smiled faintly. Do not look so frightened. I am not gone yet. Clara walked closer, her voice trembling. You scared everyone. He chuckled weakly. Good. It means I am still capable of causing trouble. The doctor cleared his throat. Mr. Hale needs rest. His heart cannot handle stress or long conversations. Alexander nodded. Just a few minutes. When the doctor and nurse stepped out, Clara sat beside him. You should not be joking about things like that. Joking keeps the fear away, he said softly. Then he added, Victor is coming again today. I need you to stand by me one last time. Why? He already believes I am your wife. Yes, Alexander said slowly, but he also believes he can make you disappear once I am gone. I need him to see that you are not afraid. The determination in his eyes frightened her more than his illness. Later that afternoon, the mansion came alive with unwanted noise. Victor Hale arrived again, this time with two lawyers and a smirk that told everyone he had already written his victory speech. He greeted no one, went straight into the drawing room, and poured himself a drink. When Clara entered with Alexander, Victor looked up. Ah, the happy couple, how touching. I heard you almost left us this morning, cousin. Pity the paperwork did not clear in time. Alexander's voice was calm. The paperwork is done, Victor. Clara is my legal wife. My estate will pass according to my wishes. Victor's smirk faltered. Surely you do not expect anyone to believe this farce? A maid marrying a dying man for love? Clara met his gaze, steady and unflinching. You are right, Mr. Hale. It was not for love. It was for mercy. Something you would not understand. The room fell silent. Even the lawyers shifted uneasily. Alexander leaned forward, his breathing ragged but his voice firm. You will respect her, Victor. She has more honor than anyone in this house. Maymoun, in a groven, Victor's expression darkened. You are losing your mind. When this charade ends, I will make sure she is removed from this estate. Alexander's hand tightened on Clara's. If you touch her, you lose everything. That clause was added this morning. Victor's jaw clenched. You cannot. I already did, Alexander interrupted. Leave. Victor's eyes burned with fury, but he turned sharply and stormed out, the sound of his shoes echoing down the marble hallway. When the door finally closed, Alexander slumped back against the chair, his breathing shallow. That was satisfying, he whispered. Clara knelt beside him, tears welling in her eyes. You should not have pushed yourself, and when should the Shah in our set at Alice is well cast. In myself. He smiled weakly. I could not let him win. The nurse rushed in, alarmed by the sound of the monitor beeping faster. He needs rest immediately, she said, adjusting the oxygen mask. Clara stood aside, her hands trembling. For the first time since she had entered this house, she felt true fear, not for her brother, not for herself, but for him. When the nurse finished, Alexander looked at Clara again, his voice faint but clear. Do not cry, Clara. Not yet. She nodded, wiping her tears. Then promise me you will fight a little longer. He smiled, his eyes half closed. For you, I will try. That night, as Clara sat by his bedside, she realized something she had been too afraid to admit. This marriage, this contract, this impossible arrangement, somewhere along the way, it had stopped being about mercy or money. It had become something much deeper. Outside, the wind rustled through the garden, carrying the scent of rain and roses through the open window. Inside, Clara reached for his hand, and for the first time, Alexander Hale fell asleep without pain. 2 days passed. The mansion seemed quieter than ever, as though it was holding its breath between life and loss. The staff spoke in whispers, their footsteps soft against the polished marble floors. Outside, the sky hung heavy with fog, the kind that never lifted completely. Clara had barely left Alexander's side since that afternoon. She brought him tea, helped the nurse with his medication, and read aloud from the worn book that always rested by his nightstand. He rarely spoke now, but whenever he did, his voice carried a calm that both comforted and frightened her. That morning he opened his eyes and found her by the window, folding the blanket she had used the night before. "You are still here," he murmured. She turned and smiled gently. "I said I would stay until you told me to leave." "I remember," he whispered. "But you should rest. You have done enough for me." "I will rest when you do," she replied softly. He chuckled, the sound fragile but warm. "You have a stubborn heart, Clara Evans. That is why I chose you." His words hung in the air, heavy with something unspoken. She pretended not to notice the way his hand trembled when he reached for the glass of water. She steadied it for him, and for a brief moment their eyes met. It was not the look of a man and his servant, nor even of a husband and wife bound by paper. It was the quiet recognition of two souls who had somehow found each other in the middle of chaos. Later that afternoon, the nurse brought in a wheelchair. "He needs to move a little," she said. "It will help his lungs." It said a jubber. Clara helped him sit, wrapping a shawl over his shoulders before wheeling him down the long hallway toward the conservatory. The glass walls glistened under the pale light, and the scent of wet roses filled the air. It was the same place where, just a week ago, she had scrubbed the floors in silence. Now she sat across from him in the same room, watching the man who had changed everything. Alexander looked out over the garden, his voice faint but steady. "Do you know why I built this place?" Clara shook her head. "My mother loved roses," he said. "She said they reminded her that beauty often grows beside pain. I thought it was a foolish idea when I was younger. Now I understand. And Matterway, there was noted refling." He paused, catching his breath. "Life is short, Clara. Too short for pride. Too short for pretending. When you find something or someone that gives you peace, do not waste it." Her heart ached. "You will get better," she whispered, even though she did not believe it. He smiled faintly. "Maybe not in this world." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of the rain returning outside. Then, suddenly, his expression changed. "Clara," he said, his voice tightening, "there is something I need you to know before I am gone." She leaned forward, fear rising in her chest. "Do not say that." "I must," he insisted. "The night I asked you to marry me, I did it because I wanted to protect what little good I had left. But now, I realize, you were the good thing I was protecting." Tears filled her eyes. "Please do not talk like this." He smiled again, weak but peaceful. "Promise me something. When I am gone, you will not live in this house. You will live." Clara could not speak. She only nodded as tears rolled silently down her cheeks. The nurse returned moments later to check his vitals, and Clara stepped aside, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. The numbers on the monitor flickered weakly, the steady beep slowing just enough to make her heart stop. Alexander reached out one last time, his hand finding hers. "Thank you for seeing me," he whispered. She squeezed his hand gently. "Rest now. I am here." As the nurse adjusted the machine, Alexander's eyes fluttered shut. The rain outside grew heavier, sliding down the glass walls like falling silver. Clara stayed beside him, her fingers never leaving his. And though no words were spoken, both of them knew what this moment meant. The contract that had begun as a desperate deal had become something far greater, an act of love neither of them had expected, and one neither of them would ever forget. The next evening, the Hale mansion was wrapped in an uneasy silence. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of rain and wilted roses. Clara sat by Alexander's bedside, listening to the slow, uneven rhythm of his breathing. Every rise and fall of his chest felt like a fragile miracle she was afraid to lose. The doctor had been clear that morning. Alexander's condition was worsening. His heart was failing faster than expected, and there was nothing more medicine could do. But even knowing that, Clara refused to leave. She read to him, spoke softly about her brother's recovery, and pretended that everything was fine. Sometimes when he drifted between sleep and wakefulness, he would reach for her hand as though grounding himself in the one thing still real. By late afternoon, the calm was broken by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Mrs. Dalton hurried into the room, her face pale. "It is Victor," she said. "He is not alone." Clara stood, her pulse quickening. Within minutes, Victor entered the suite with two men in dark suits and a lawyer trailing behind him. His smug expression told Clara everything he had come for, what he thought was rightfully his. Alexander stirred at the noise, his eyelids fluttering open. "Victor," he rasped. "This is not the time." Victor smirked. "You have had your time, cousin. The world is already talking. Reporters know about your little marriage stunt. Do you think they will believe this was anything but manipulation?" Clara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Leave him alone. He needs peace." Victor ignored her. "Peace? Do you think peace comes from lies? You married a maid, Alexander. You disgraced the family name for pity." Alexander's weak hand tightened around the blanket. "Get out, Victor. You have no power here." Victor's tone turned cold. "Oh, I have more power than you realize. The board of Hale Industries met this morning. They are voting to remove your name from the foundation. You will be remembered as a man who lost everything." Clara's heart clenched. She had never hated anyone before, but in that moment, she saw cruelty in its purest form. "How can you say such things to him?" she demanded. "He built everything you are destroying." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You should learn your place, Mrs. Hale. When he dies, you will have nothing. The lawyers will see to that." Before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension, weak but steady. "Enough!" Everyone turned toward him. He struggled to sit upright, the nurse rushing to steady him, but he waved her off. His gray eyes locked on Victor. "You want control? Take it. But hear me now, Victor. The Hale name will never belong to you, no matter how many papers you sign. It will live in the foundation I built, in the hospitals and shelters that bear my name. And Clara," he turned to her, his expression softening, "she will make sure of that." Victor froze. "What are you talking about?" Alexander motioned weakly to the lawyer beside him. "The final amendment was signed this morning. Clara Hale is the new executor of my estate and the foundation's primary trustee." The color drained from Victor's face. "You cannot be serious." The lawyer nodded. "It is legally binding. You no longer have authority over any Hale assets." Victor's fury erupted. "You will regret this. She will destroy everything." Alexander's voice cracked but held steady. "No, Victor. She will save what you never could." Security was called, and within minutes, Victor was escorted from the property, shouting threats that faded down the long marble corridor. When the doors finally closed, the house fell silent again. Clara turned back to Alexander, tears blurring her vision. "Why would you do that? You should not have wasted your strength on him." He smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. "Because he needed to see that kindness wins, even in the end." Her hands trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Rest now. It is over." And many South Falloway into rightly dune and in the man's forgotti. He looked at her one last time, eyes full of gratitude. "You kept your promise," he said softly. "You stayed." Clara pressed her hand over his, her tears falling freely now. "And I always will." The monitors beeped softly, the steady rhythm fading to a quiet hum. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady like a final goodbye from the sky itself. It was almost dawn when the rain stopped. The mansion was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock beside the bed. Clara sat motionless, her hand still resting over Alexander's. The monitor beside him no longer made a sound. His chest was still. The world had gone still with him. For a long time, she could not move. The nurse came in silently, placed a trembling hand on Clara's shoulder, and whispered, "He is gone." But Clara already knew. She had felt the life leave his hand before the nurse even entered the room. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, soft light spilled across the bed. Alexander looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep. There was no fear in his face, no pain, only quiet. Clara leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You found peace." The rest of the day passed like a blur. The doctor signed the papers. The lawyer spoke in low tones about arrangements and wills. The staff cried quietly in corners. Victor did not return. He had already lost everything that mattered. By evening, the mansion stood in silence, stripped of its arrogance and noise. 2 days later, the funeral was held in the rose garden that Alexander had loved so much. The same conservatory where he had once told her about his mother was now filled with white lilies and pale roses. A small group attended, close staff, a few board members, and the doctor who had cared for him until the end. Clara stood apart from the crowd, wearing a black dress and holding a single rose. She did not cry during the ceremony. The tears had already come and gone in the quiet hours before dawn. When the minister finished speaking, she stepped forward. Alexander Hale was not a perfect man, she said softly, but he was a good one. He taught me that redemption is not bought with wealth, but earned with honesty. He gave more than money. He gave people dignity. And in the end, he gave me something no one else ever has: belief that kindness still matters. She placed the rose on his casket and stepped back, her heart aching but steady. The wind rustled through the garden, carrying the scent of rain and roses one more time. After the ceremony, the lawyer handed her a small envelope sealed with Alexander's initials. Inside was a letter written in his hand. Clara, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not mourn me for too long. I had my share of everything: power, failure, and in the end, something like love. Take the foundation and make it something good. Save the lives I could not. And remember, the world will try to remind you of where you came from. Let them. That is your strength. With all my gratitude, Alexander Hale. Her tears fell silently onto the page. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her heart. The next morning, Clara returned to the hospital in Brooklyn. Her brother was awake, weak, but smiling. The doctor said the surgery had gone perfectly. When he asked how she had managed to pay for it, she only said, "A friend helped me." Weeks turned into months. Clara visited the mansion less and less, but she kept one promise. The Hale Foundation for Hope officially opened 3 months later, providing free care to patients who could not afford treatment. She ran it quietly, without the luxury that once defined its name. On the first day of the opening, she stood by the foundation's entrance, watching families walk through the doors. A small plaque by the gate read, "Built on the belief that mercy is stronger than pride." Clara smiled faintly, brushing her fingers across the engraved letters. In that moment, she realized Alexander had not really left. His kindness lived in every corner of this place, in every life that would be changed, in every person who would find hope again. And as the sun rose over the city, lighting the glass walls in gold, Clara whispered to the wind, "You were right, Alexander. One night really can change everything." 1 year later, spring returned to New York, soft and golden. The Hale Foundation had become a place of quiet miracles. Families lined the corridors every morning, doctors greeted patients by name, and laughter replaced the sterile silence that once filled the mansion. Clara walked through the main lobby, carrying a small bouquet of white roses in her hands, the same kind Alexander had once kept in his garden. She had kept her promise. Every dollar of his estate had gone toward healing others. A new children's wing was under construction, and the nurses joked that Clara never took a single day off. But those who knew her best understood that she worked not from duty, but from love. Love for the man who had believed in her when the world had not. That evening, after the last patient was discharged, Clara climbed to the rooftop terrace of the foundation. The city stretched below her in shimmering lights. It was quiet except for the hum of the wind and the faint music drifting from a street violinist far below. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool air. In her hand, she held the small silver wedding band she had worn on her finger for only 1 day. It had become worn and smooth from the countless times she had turned it between her fingers. She lifted it to the fading light and whispered, "You are still here, Alexander. Every time someone smiles in this place, you are here." As the wind picked up, she smiled through her tears. "You once said you built walls to feel safe, but you left me the key to open them for others." It nus January. She placed the ring on the edge of the flower box beside her and pressed her palm over it for a moment. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the same colors that had filled the conservatory on the night they shared their last quiet conversation. From behind her, a voice called softly, "Mrs. Hale?" It was Dr. Morgan, the chief of staff. "The media is downstairs. They want a photo for tomorrow's feature about the foundation's anniversary." Clara turned, her expression warm. Tell them I will be right there. As the doctor left, she took one last look at the horizon. You were right, she said softly. A single act of kindness can outlive everything. Then she straightened her coat and walked downstairs, her steps steady and graceful. The camera flashes met her as she entered the lobby. A reporter asked, Mrs. Hale, what inspired you to dedicate your life to this foundation? Clara paused for a moment, then answered, a promise. To someone who believed that mercy was the greatest form of power. The room fell silent for a beat before the reporter smiled and said, that is beautiful. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Clara returned to the quiet garden behind the building. She placed one of the white roses from her bouquet beside the memorial plaque that read, Alexander Hale, 1987, 2024. He lived to remind the world that compassion is never wasted. She knelt beside it, her voice barely above a whisper. Rest well, Alexander. You have already changed more lives than you ever imagined, including mine. A gentle breeze stirred the petals, carrying the faint scent of roses through the air. She closed her eyes, feeling the peace that he had always wanted her to have. As the lights of the city glowed brighter in the distance, Clara stood and walked back inside. The foundation's doors closed softly behind her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt whole. And somewhere beyond the noise of the city, in the quiet rhythm of a heart healed by kindness, his memory lived on proof that even the briefest love can last forever.